Good morning, everybody. If I could just call you to order, we'll make a fairly prompt start. Yes, welcome to the Joint Audit and Standards Committee. I am Councillor Bryn Hurren and I'm chairing the meeting this morning. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use and that you do not interrupt other speakers. That if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. Additionally, we'll be using e-voting this morning on the modern Gov app. If you're unable to use, let Bethany know and we'll ask for a show of hands. If you make representations to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting or future training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you are intending to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. Now, officers in attendance today, we have Melissa Evans, the Director of Finance and Procurement, David Fevio Ward, Head of Finance, Tim Byford, Senior Financial Accountant. Then we have a new officer, Amber Jeffs, Senior Financial Accountant, who made her debut at Baber 1 hour ago, so straight into the hot seat. Welcome, Amber, and we look forward to working with you. Alicia Norman, the Deputy Monitoring Officer, and Bethany Webb to my left, who's the Governance Officer this morning. So welcome, everybody. And I'd also just like to welcome again Chris Bolton, who was here last time, and Hannah Brown for the first time, who are our independent members. Very welcome to both of you. And I'd like to think you enjoy the meeting or taken part in it, but you know, don't be afraid to speak and help us all you can, because it's a great achievement of us to have you here and we welcome you. Thank you. One thing I would say, I'm a bit hoarse this morning and it does affect my hearing, so when you speak, if you could just use the microphone, please, and face me, and it's okay. When it's like this, I can't wear a hearing aid, but I do lip read pretty well, and it's just the conditions this morning, so sorry about that. Apologies for absence and substitutes, please, Bethany.
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Adrian Marriott, Councillor John Whitehead and Councillor Adrian Osborne.
And any substitutes?
No, Chair.
Okay, we're running a bit light then, okay. Declarations of interest by members? None received, okay. To confirm, item 3, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of May. Are there any points regarding the accuracy, please? No. In that case, can I have a proposer and a seconder? Lee Jameson to propose and Tim Register to second. And we'll do that virtually, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That is 4 votes for and 2 abstentions, so that's carried.
Thank you very much. That's carried. Notification of petitions.
None received, Chair.
Questions by the public?
None received, Chair.
And any questions by councillors?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Well, we'll go straight to the main body of the meeting, which is the JAC 26/6 draft statement of accounts. David Fevier Ward is going to be presenting that to us, please, and then we'll have questions and then a debate afterwards. It's a very long paper, but I think David will obviously see it in its shortest form. We've had a briefing and there's some high points he's going to mention, but it's a result of a year's work that's gone, which is what we are. We audit things. So the floor is yours, Tim. Sorry, David. The terrible twins side by side.
I'm more than happy to pass over to Tim in his last week.
Can you speak up a bit, please?
Yep.
Yeah, so we
can
can
you hear me okay?
Yeah, that would be fine.
So, thank you, Chair. So, I'm pleased to present a presentation on the draft statement of accounts for 2025-26 for both councils. The documents are on our websites and we are currently in the consultation window, so the 30-day consultation window that will end in a few days' time. We so far haven't had any queries, which is good. So I'll take you through the documents. So what I'm going to do is refer to the page numbers and the notes where I'm referring to. So which will hopefully help you if you've got the statement of accounts in front of you in terms of tracking where I am talking about. So in terms of an executive summary, we start on page 70 for note 38. So both councils remain a going concern, which is a really good thing, despite local government reorganisation being on the horizon. So going concern meaning that both councils will continue in their current guise for the foreseeable future for a minimum of 12 months. And the accounts have been prepared under the CIPFA Code, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounting Code, and the International Financial Reporting Standards, IFRS, with regards to the funding and accounting basis within local government. So, onto the key headlines for BABA. So, referring to pages 10 and 11. So, apologies if it does feel like I'm jumping around the statement of accounts, but it's just in terms of referring to certain notes.
The page numbers are the page numbers that are the statement of accounts, not the numbers in the report.
Noted. Yeah, so the page numbers are the actual page numbers in the statement of accounts, not within the actual pack for Joint Audit and Standards Committee. So, thank you for Melissa pointing that out. So we reported a general fund deficit of 1.2 million, and in the prior year this was 1 million for BABA. The HRA reported a deficit of 2.47 million, due mainly to 3.5 million revenue contribution to capital, and these were the figures that were reported through to Cabinet in June. The capital programme spend was 21.9 million, with 9 million in the general fund and 13.9 million in the HRA. And on this slide, we also have the reserves, which shows the total earmarked reserves for BABA of 21.2 million, which is reduced from 25.3 million from the prior year. This is the combination of a reduction in the general fund to 9 million and the HRA reserves down to 12.2 million. So on page 12, one of the Joint Audit and Standards Committee's focuses is around our borrowing, which of course will come on to as well as part of the Treasury outturn paper later in the agenda. So borrowing has reduced to 123.6 million from 125.7 million. So this is part of our active programme to either maintain or to reduce our debt. Pensions is one of the big areas of the statement of accounts. So this has improved with the net liability position being capped at nil due to our asset ceiling calculation. So the pension is referred to within note 32, which is on page 62 to 66 of the statement of accounts. So the calculation without the asset ceiling calculation is capped at it would be a position of 40.3 million. So in practice, however, the council would not look to obtain refunds from the pension fund, and therefore the pension is capped at nil. Instead, Future contributions are reduced because, as we know, the pension funds for both councils and for Suffolk overall is in a really healthy surplus. So future contributions are reduced to 16.4% in 26-27, 10% in 27-28 and 16.4% in 28-29. And this is the employer's contribution only. It doesn't affect anything to do with the employee. In terms of Mid Suffolk, so this is on page 12 of Mid Suffolk's statement of accounts. So we reported a general fund surplus of 4.6 million. In 24-25, this was 5.6 million. Mid Suffolk have been really fortunate with the dividends being received from Gateway 14. So there was 6 million received in 25-26, and 20 million in 24-25. Capital programme spend of 34.6 million, with 23.3 million in the general fund and 11.2 million in the HRA. A lot of the general fund spend was on the Stowmarket Innovation Gateway, with nearly 13 million, which completed in 26-27. The reserves, summary of the reserves table is shown on this slide as well, with the general fund reserves reducing to 49.2 million from 50.7, and the HRA strategic reserves reducing to 4.6 million from a little over 5 million. So for the JASC focus for Mid Suffolk, so we still hold a large strategic reserve, which is linked to the investment programme, which continues into 26-27. Borrowing has reduced quite nicely from 102 million to 92.8 million, and that's shown on page 14. And indeed, at the year end, we only have 5 million of short-term borrowing. The pension contribution, with a net liability, has been capped at 160,000 due to the asset ceiling calculation. And again, this is shown within note 32 on pages 64 to 68. The calculation without being capped is at 34.2 million. And similar to BABA, we would not look to obtain refunds from the pension funds, and the contributions for Mid Suffolk will be the same as BABA. So the 16.4, 10, and then the 16.4% again. The one difference between BABA and Mid Suffolk is that Mid Suffolk has unfunded obligations within the pension scheme. So this is shown on note 32, page 66. So International Accounting Standard 19, so IAS 19 pension report from our actuaries Hyman Robertson shows an unfunded obligation of 160k. So this is a pension-related liability which is not backed by assets in the fund and relates to compensatory added years. So this relates to historical employees who were granted additional years of pensionable service when they were made redundant or retired early, and these added years increase the employee's eventual pension benefits. Now these employees predate myself and Melissa, so this was a significant number of years ago, so it's not something that's happened in recent time. So unlike normal pension benefits, which are financed through the employer and employee contributions, some compensatory added years were retained as a direct employer responsibility. So the pension fund may pay the pension to the member, the council reimburses the fund for the cost, or no dedicated pension assets have been set aside to meet this liability. So under the accounting standard, the present value of these future obligations appears as an unfunded obligation. In short, the implication for us is that this is a future liability, so it is something that potentially may need to be paid out in the future, but it is not an immediate cash requirement of today. So, onto the comprehensive income and expenditure analysis and the expenditure and funding analysis. So you may hear these referred to as the CIES or the EFA. So for BABA, this starts on page 21. So we've had an increase in expenditure in assets and investments, which relates to the minimum revenue provision, or MRP, charge for the expected credit loss on BABA growth. Within economic development and regen, our prior year contained a tariff payment, which was incorrectly added here, which has then resulted in a variance for the current year. Environmental and commercial, there's been an increase in contract costs for the waste services and an increase in the grants for better recycling. So we've seen an increase in both the income and the expenditure there. For our corporate resources, there's been a fall in housing benefits income and expenditure and a reduction in the impairment from our revaluation in 25-26 compared to 24-25. And other operating expenditure includes increased gains on disposal of fixed assets in 25-26 compared to 24-25. And then the pension is there as well as the HRA, which shows a large reduction in the impairment between the financial years, resulting in lower expenditure. For Mid Suffolk, so the CIES and the EFA start on page 22. So for our assets and investments section, there's been an increase in the revenue expenditure funded by capital under statute, or REFCUS for short. So this is due to the grants that have been provided by Mid Suffolk to businesses and communities for capital works that do not generate assets for the council. So a really good example of this is the Stowmarket Town Centre Gateway Fund, where we've given capital grants to businesses in the district, but for Mid Suffolk there is no asset for us to capitalise. So that is treated under the REFCUS regime in local government, and that is an increase of 762,000 because that was a programme that started in 25-26 rather than in 24-25. There was also a write-off of the Mid Suffolk Growth scheme of phase 2 of 820k from that scheme that didn't proceed. Environmental and commercial, we've also had an increase in contract costs for waste services and an increase in grants from better recycling, similar to BABA. And also in corporate resources, a fall in housing benefits income expenditure and a reduction in impairment from the valuation compared to 24-25. And there was also 5.7 million in grant that was received for the funding of the Stowmarket Innovation Gateway. This was seed capital funding, of which there's still £300,000 to receive, which will be received in 26-27. There's been a big shift in the financing investments section as well because of the reduction in the dividend from 20 million in 24-25 to 6 million in 25-26. The pension movements, as already discussed, and then similar to BABA, a reduction in the impairment between the financial years, resulting in lower expenditure there as well. So the movement in reserve statement, or MERS, as you may hear it referred to, this is on page 20. This shows the split between what is a usable reserve, so what we can use in the general fund and the HRA to fund various activities, and then our unusable reserves. So unusable reserves being the pension reserve, our revaluation reserve, financial instrument reserves, etc. So our usable reserves for the general fund, 10.261 million, and the HRA, 12.2 million, are broken down in note 8. The working capital balance for the general fund and HRA comes back to the 1.2 and 1 million respectively. And this, the movement in reserves also shows the usable capital receipts and SIL reserves of the council. As mentioned, it also provides the breakdown of, it provides a summary of what is broken down within note 19 for the revaluation, pension, financial instruments, pooled funds, accumulated absence and capital adjustment account. For Mid Suffolk, the movement in reserves is on page 21. This again shows a split between the usable and unusable reserves. For the general fund for Mid Suffolk, it shows 49.2 million and the HRA 4.7 million, which is broken down in note 8, with working balances of 1.052 million and 1 million for the general fund and HRA. Onto the balance sheet for BABA. So page 22 is where the balance sheet is located. This shows BABA's net assets of 263.3 million, which has increased from 24-25 from 243.4 million. Both councils have reported stronger balance sheet positions, which has been driven by increased asset valuations and a decrease in the pension liabilities, with this being capped at nil. We've also seen the decrease in total borrowing, although short-term borrowing has increased for BABA. And we've also seen changes in the short-term investments following the sale of the Schroeder pooled funds. Provisions have also fallen due to a large reduction in the business rates appeal provision. For Mid Suffolk, it's a very similar story. So we've seen an increase in the net asset position to 378.2 million from 354 million. This is driven by a reduction in borrowing, driven by stronger asset valuations and a reduction in the pension. Mid Suffolk has also sold the Schroeder fund as well and seen the same fall in the provision for the business rate appeals. So our asset valuations. So note 12 is our property, plant and equipment note, which is on page 39 to 42. This shows that property, plant and equipment has increased from 330 million to 341 million. In the general fund, this is driven by an overall net upward revaluation with the largest gains at Kingfisher Leisure Centre, Hadley Pool and Leisure and the Station Road car park in Sudbury. There have been impairments at 3 car parks, totaling 349,000, and at the Chiltern Depot. And then in the HRA, there's overall net upward revaluation with the largest gains amongst shared ownership properties. For the HRA valuation, we group properties into what is called a beacon group. So this means that properties are grouped into similar groups. So a 2-bed asset, for example, so a 2-bed property in Sudbury, all grouped together and valued as a group rather than individually. So for Mid-Suffolk, on note 12, our property, plant and equipment note, which starts on page 41 and goes to page 44, the property, plant and equipment has increased from 366.6 million to 375.5 million. In the general fund, there's been an overall net upward valuation with the largest gains at Ipswich Street Car Park, Mid-Suffolk Leisure Centre and Needham Library. And we've seen impairments at Milton Road Car Park and then Wingfield Barnes. In the HRA, we've actually seen a downward revaluation with the majority of properties being impaired. And there are still some investigations for us to conduct with one of the new developments at Lorraine Way, based on the prior year figures, and the team are looking into this and proposing a correction for the prior year. So on to the final slide, which I'm sure you will all be glad to hear. So the key risks as part of the statement of accounts are, of course, the first being local government reorganisation. That will be one of the things that the auditors will explore with us in terms of the going concern. The reserves level in BABA, and how, again, that fits in with the going concern assessment. The delivery of the audit and meeting the audit timelines. So we have, for the second year in a row, met the publication deadline, which is a fantastic achievement for the team. Of course, last year we really fell down in terms of meeting the audit timelines. So this year, much more emphasis on making sure we meet those and making sure that the team is ready and prepared and we have the resource to meet those timelines. So some of the key audit areas that we know that we'll look into in more detail are the valuation of the council-owned assets, which have been valued by an external third party, the pension position and the valuation by the actuary, again, work conducted by an external third party, the audit of our subsidiary companies, the BABA growth minimum revenue provision adjustment, which is going to be one of the technical areas that they will look into following changes in legislation, and then, especially for Mid-Suffolk, have we accounted for and correctly flowed through the statement of accounts the reserve funding of the capital programme and how this has flowed through the CIES. So thank you very much for your time today, and that is the statement of accounts. And open the floor to questions.
Right, thank you, David. Well presented and interesting. Just a few questions from myself. You said we're taking a bit of a break from the pension fund. Will there be any catching up to do next year, or is it just level and we carry on as normal?
So the pension fund, there will just be the reductions in the employer contributions. So for we're in 26-27 now. So the pension contribution has reduced from 26% to 16.4%. So that's not just for BABA and Mid-Suffolk, that's across Suffolk because of how well the pension fund, it's been overfunded basically in the last few years and it's performing really well. So those pension contributions have been reduced. It's then been agreed across Suffolk for 27-28 to reduce those further to 10% for a one-off year, and then they will increase back to 16.7% for 28-29, and that will be that 3-year triennial valuation period because the pension scheme is revalued every 3 years, which then resets the pension contribution rate.
Right, thank you. Yes, that's clear. It's one thing I was just going to say from the chair. I love the narrative that you've all put together. It's really, really good. I'm not saying the figures are boring, but it certainly makes the whole lot easier to read, doesn't it? And a great asset, so well done. My second question is, obviously we're looking back, but some of the narrative I think is looking forward as well. You've talked about getting grants from Prosperity Fund and all sorts of things. Is that now, or is that pertaining to the year we've just finished? Or is this going to be ongoing, I hope? Because it looks as if most of what we're doing for the people is funded by different sources. We're getting more money and more grants in. So just a comment on that, please.
Yep, so the kind of commentary section at the start is backward looking. So it is looking at what we've achieved in the financial year. So your specific points around the Shared Prosperity Fund and then the Rural England Prosperity Fund, those funds cease in 26-27. So there were some extensions to those funds by the government, but those funds basically end in this financial year. So there is money that is still to be spent in 26-27 specifically for the Shared Prosperity Fund, which the economy team are managing. But yeah, so they won't, beyond 26-27, they won't be available.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just one last thing for me. We did touch on this in the briefing, but page 22 or 12 in the summary, well, for Baber, the borrowing overall is 123 million, but that includes the HRA part, doesn't it? And it does include the 92 million, was it, that we borrowed to buy our own council houses back. I wonder if you could just tell me how much has been paid back and how long it's going to take to pay the rest back, please. Yeah, I'm sorry to comment on this again, but it's something I felt very strongly about at the time, and I think it would be nice for all the members to know where we're going this and roughly how long this debt is going to take to pay back, if ever.
In terms of what's been paid back, I'll have to take that away to report back. But the split is in the Treasury paper, which we'll just find and report back. Page 258 in the back. Yeah. So for Baber, the 72.4 million of PWLB HRA borrowing. So it was actually 6 million repaid in the financial year. And then for Mid Suffolk, there is 69 million of PWLB loans that relate to the HRA. The HRA from Mid Suffolk also has 4 million of lender option, borrower option loans as well.
We paid back about 20 million then in 8 years, is it? That's approximately. Yeah, okay.
To get the specific number, I'll have to come back to you if that's okay.
Okay, we're getting there slowly. Okay, thank you. Open to questions from other members, please. There's a lot in here, so yeah, far away. Council Register, and then Chris Bolton.
Page 32 or page 42 on members' packs, note 6, it says that the interest payments went up from 24-25 to 25-26. Is this because we're borrowing more and paying more interest, or because interest rates have increased? Yeah? So note 6 says interest payments were 3.022 million in 24-25 and 5.558 million in 25-26. So is that because we're borrowing more or because interest rates have increased?
it's partly interest rates. We did borrow less, but we're just looking into what the specific, because I think there's something else in there that will add that. So we'll get back to you.
So we can blame the Bank of England.
Okay, thank you. Chris, please.
There we go. Thank you for that. It was really informative and covered all the bases. One of the things you mentioned on page 239 around unfunded obligation for pensions, and you mentioned that obviously unfunded, and there's going to be some sort of future liability. Do we know sort of how we're going to meet this unfunded liability? Was it just an accounting thing? We push it into the future and hopefully something will turn up?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, yeah. So there's obviously no kind of guarantee that it will come forward. But to say, so for the prior year, it was 178k. Now it's come down to 160k. So it will get revalued every year, but as the years have gone by, it's slowly coming down. But in terms of materiality for the whole kind of pension scheme, it's quite small in when you look at the actual overall pension scheme.
Thank you.
Councillor Matheson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was also looking particularly at this extra pensions. It's nice to have it explained what it is. What I was wondering was, presumably this resulted from employees' employment contracts way back in the day, and do we, bearing in mind LGR, do we know whether we've got lots of employees currently where their contract of employment will include some compensation should they take redundancy through the LGR process?
Yep, so where if there are redundancies taken, they're generally funded straight away, so then it doesn't come into this kind of unfunded. But we aren't alone in this, so county also have a number of employees with this as well, so they have unfunded obligations, so we aren't the only council in Suffolk to have this.
Yes, I didn't quite follow that. So, I mean, yes, we pay the redundancy payment. And what I mean is, the redundancy payment's a lump sum, but is there also going to be an additional liability arising on the pension fund? Or I think I'm supposed to declare the fact that I'm a member of the pension committee, by the way.
Yeah, there generally is when we have a redundancy calculation, there is always a pension strain and a pension impact, so that will be judged on a case-by-case basis. So yeah, you're correct, there will be.
Okay, thank you. Something else?
Okay. Councillor Rowe, please.
Yeah, I think I may have asked this last year. I'm pretty sure I've asked it in the meeting before. But about the pension assumptions, there's it's split into male and female, and I'm pretty sure I asked about kind of socio-demographic elements, because that can have an impact on assumptions for how long people live, and also there isn't any information about like non-binary people, and also something I've been asked before is, do we only use the LGPS, or do we have people on other schemes like Nest, anything like that?
So yeah, I do remember this question from last year. This is only local government pension scheme, so either for our employees they're either in the local government pension scheme or they're not in the pension scheme because they've opted out, and then they're re-opted in every 3 years, I think. We'd have to speak to Hymans who provide this information in terms of that kind of demographics, and then also if there's anything around information they've got for like non-binary, etc. So we can take it away and speak to Hymans.
Thank you.
Councillor Baker, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've had a couple, if that was okay. One was a small one. Firstly, the accounts look great, and it's in a much better position than I'd thought the situation was going to be. So, really, really chuffed, and it's looking really good. So, well done, everybody. A small one in terms of I saw compensation to companies, 53,000 that was going for compensation in relation to the closure of a site where you've had to do repairs. Now, I know in the budget and in the plan there's some plans to some of those leisure centres, some large sort of refurbishment. I'm wondering, and I can't remember, if there is an allowance for compensation, if I were expecting that, to the likes of those leisure centres because of all this work coming up. I wondered if we've got an allowance coming this year, because I can't remember one. So that was question one.
Yeah, I can take that one. So if you're referring to the works that are happening in Mid Suffolk's Leisure Centre, so the conversation's already happened with everyone active, and there isn't any need for compensation for that closure of the however long it is currently happening, I think. So there won't be anything equivalent to what Abbeycroft had.
Right, thank you. And Stradbroke, because there's work at Stradbroke as well.
Yeah, no, it's the same.
That's fine. Thank you. And then I had two other little ones, if I may. It says on the key risks, LGR, obviously, and then key audit areas being the valuation of council-owned assets. On the run-up to LGR, will there be a valuation of assets? And when is that?
Yeah, I can take that. We've already started having those conversations, and there's a couple of implications there, not only for audits as well. So we did undertake a full valuation of all our assets for this year, so we're in quite a good position that we have that data, but obviously the other Suffolk authorities are not necessarily in that position. But the other implication is around the insurance of those assets as well, so we will have to have those all valued before day one, so that we make sure we've got the correct values and the correct insurance levels in place from day one as well. So good question.
And then one more tiny. Delivery of the audit and meeting audit timelines. I know that you've had plans. I wonder what the mitigation for those risks are and how that's going to be managed this year.
Well, sadly, Tim is leaving us at the end of the week, but we have Amber here already to take over. So one of the mitigations is quite handily having a week's handover where Tim's going to take his brain and give it to Amber this week. So we have had the audit queries come through. We've had 310 audit queries come through. So now it's a case of we're just going to plough through them as much as we can to get them ready. So they're giving us a deadline towards the end of August for those ready for when we get in. So we'll just work our way through those now and make sure that we're ahead. And I think we're in a much better place than last year. We've already provided the data analytics to EY, so they've got that information again already in really good time.
Councillor Jameson.
Thanks, Chair. Okay. Thanks for the report. Good bedtime reading. I notice on page 22 of your report, Baber's short-term debtors have gone up by about £250,000. Mid Suffolk's have come down by about 3 million. I just wondered if what that is, and are we likely to get that money back at Baber?
Yep, so the short-term borrowing position, this is just a case of how things are when they're coming due. So in Baber, we've used a lot more short-term borrowing from other local authorities. So that 43.5 million is all due within the kind of next 12 months. In terms of refinancing that, we will either pay it back with available cash that we've got, or look to refinance it through either PWLB loans, other local authorities, etc. So obviously the long-term ambition is to reduce the debt as much as possible, but so that will be the plan. In terms of Mid Suffolk, they've been quite fortunate, obviously, with the dividends that they've received from Gateway 14, which has enabled them to repay borrowings and not have to refinance them because they've got surplus cash. Baber isn't quite in that same situation, so they've had to kind of roll the financing where...
The £11 million short-term debtors, is that not money owed to us?
Yeah, in terms of the short-term, there's money owed to us. Apologies, I misheard the question.
I noticed as the amount of money owed to us has gone up by about 250,000 for Baber, but we seem to be collecting more. Mid Suffolk has gone down by 3 million. I just wondered why Baber's is going up, and is there a problem getting the money back?
I don't think it's a problem of us getting money back, but we'll look into the exact reason and we can get you a response to that.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, first, yeah, well done. That, you know, just as a general sense of confidence and timeliness and so on, which is just so welcome. Coupled with the fact that we've got a strong team doing it as well. Not just the people that are here, but more than that, obviously, a team behind you. And yes, the clarity, as Chair said, of the narrative is also very, very welcome. So just a couple of other little ones I wanted to understand. Presume I'm on page 241, looking at the well, they're the slides, aren't they? Essentially, corporate resources. The 5.7 million for the Innovation Gateway, that's in that year, and presumably there's another chunk following on in the current year.
Yeah, there's just 300k left to come in 26-27 because it was 6 million seed capital funding that was received for the Innovation Gateway building, so there's only 300k left to be received.
Good, yeah. And the other one on there really was I couldn't quite understand why, if on the HRA, the impairment is the valuation is better than it was previously of the property, are we saying, the houses. I couldn't quite see how the valuation would reduce the expenditure. And obviously there's a tail on that particular note that the prior year looks incorrect. So could we get a bit more explanation of what's going on there? And am I misunderstanding what the impairment is?
Yeah, we'll get an explanation. We'll take that one away and get you an explanation.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Any more? Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies for being late this morning. Can I go to page 56 or 46? Notes to the core financial statements. And you can go down to the bottom table, which is financial assets. And I never quite understand this because we sometimes use brackets. So can we look at bond equity and property funds? Currently, the balance sheet and the fair value are equal, and previously these figures were 8 million. Am I right in assuming that we've either had repayments or we've applied reserves to the values to bring them down? Or is that, you know, how we brought this value down? That's the question.
Yep, so the reduction in the pooled funds is the sale of the Schroeder Fund. So the Schroeder Fund was sold during the year, so that reflects the reduction there.
Right, excellent. That's what I'm glad you told me. Right. So, and if we go on to the continuation of that table on the next page, I can't quite understand why we have a balance sheet. No, I can see it. It's all right. So, yes, so 25-26, we have a total balance sheet figure of financial assets of 57.5 million. Down from 62. How does this figure relate to the fair value of 6.3 million? Or does it?
The 6.3 million is just a part of that 65.5. 57.5. So the 57.5 is broken down into long-term debtors of 48.8 million, 408,000 of trade receivables, 6.3 million of short-term investments, which is the figure that we were just talking about, and then 2 million of cash, and then that totals your 57.5 million.
Right. So my balance sheet figure is either fair market value or close to. I mean, one of the problems we had before was some of our valuations were not, what can I say? I won't say they were spurious, but they were not fair market value. You know, that they were a mixture of our own valuations, you know, which we could not verify. So what I'm saying is, this balance sheet figure, 57.5 million, is that a fair market value or close to?
So the investments is the only one that has a fair value of it. Everything else is being carried at book value, kind of what the actuals are.
Right. Good. Fine. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? You're shuffling, John, as if you're trying to...
I think I found them.
Contrary to what John said earlier, I was also interested in the value of our council housing stock, which has gone up. Is that because the market has gone up, or is it because we've obviously been working on them, and does that reflect in the value? I've just trying to work out why the valuation had gone up by quite a bit, actually.
There's numerous factors that go into the valuation. There could be changes in interest rates. It could be changes in bill costs, inflation. So there's a whole multitude of factors that go into the valuation, which is why we get a third party, usually RICS qualified, so chartered surveyor basically to complete the valuations for us. And we did have a full valuation done this year as well, so it wasn't just desktop based. So they were out in the districts valuing the properties as well.
So you're saying maybe they were a bit undervalued before?
No, not undervalued, but that would have been the value at the time. So the market changes on an annual basis. So those values would have been just based on what information was available at the time.
Okay. And also I looked, you list what our assets are worth in total, but you didn't seem to list what our housing stock is worth, or did I just miss that? I was just interested, I'm not quite sure how many we've got anymore with the right to buy, but I couldn't see a separate listing for the value of all our housing stock, but I may have missed it. There was a lot there.
Yep, so it is contained within note 12. So for Baber on page 40 and on page 39 and then into 40 for the prior year, you've got council dwellings as a column. So you've got 291,699 in there for the cost and valuation, and then the depreciation below. So you've got a net book value of 291.7 million there for your council dwellings. And then the rest of the split is into other land and buildings, vehicle, plant and equipment, infrastructure, community assets, surplus assets, and then assets under construction, giving you your total PPE figure.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go back and recheck that. I must have been getting sleepy when I got to that point. Okay, any other questions before we go to the debate? No? Right. Debate or comments on what we've seen or read? If not, we'll go straight to the vote.
There's not a vote on this one, it's just for noting. It's just for noting.
Oh, just for noting, yeah. Yeah, Councillor Rowe.
I was wondering, as I've had to raise the same point both years, whether we can put in a recommendation that can we get a bit about the socio-economic and about more genders, even if it's just unknown, partly because the life expectancy between like most deprived and least deprived areas, and I don't know what it is for council staff, but I know council staff generally aren't on like minimum wage or like no pension, stuff like that. So I'd expect there to be potentially a higher life expectancy, which then has an effect on pension things that we have to put aside. So yeah, if we can get that reported back and in future years as well, like included in the report, that'd be good.
Okay, thank you. And John?
Yeah, just to comment on that, actually, from the pension committee perspective, that you know, the actuarial calculations of the liability for pensions is, you know, it's a hugely complex, very thorough calculation, which I suspect would effectively embrace what you're asking about. It would be, you know, the employees that we have and that we've had will be therefore in certain social classes, etc., which will affect their life expectancy in the ways that you're suggesting. Yes, they will, but I think that all gets taken into consideration. Actually, it's worked out, so I don't think we need to worry about it. I think we pay our pension advisor and then some more people that actuarial. I can't remember what the firm is called, but there's an actuary that's used for the purpose. Does that any help?
Okay, you wish to come back, Councillor Rowe?
Yeah, I was thinking, if that work is being done, then that should then be able to be put into a report somehow. So I'd still basically splitting. One, there's an issue of kind of misgendering people, and partly there's it being a bit meaningless saying the assumption based purely on gender when there's so many other bits. So, well, not completely meaningless, but like you say, there's all this work being done, and that's not like one of the tables that isn't shown at all. So that'd be useful to be included.
No, okay, thank you. Any comment on that from, yes, Melissa, I see you itching to answer.
It's not necessarily an answer, it's just something to point out that we might not actually have that data for all of the employees in the pension scheme, because I know when we did the pay and reward review, we did an equalities impact assessment, and we didn't have that level of data because people don't have to, have to declare that or disclose that with their employer. So there might be a little bit of challenge around that. Not having the data as well might play into it.
Yeah. That kind of I was expecting not to have that, but given there's like the very broad brush of here's 50% of like 49.8 and 50.2% of the population in the table, that is very broad brush, for an assumptions, and even if it's a kind of this is broadly how the sector or broadly how kind of the east of England demographics are in and so that might feed into it rather than being exactly what our workforce is at any particular time, if that's possible. By the sounds of it, there is that work being done.
Okay, thank you. Any other contributions? If not, we'll go straight to noting. Yeah, I'm told that we don't have to vote on this. It's just noting is done and finished. So thank you, everybody. On to the next one. Very good paper, I have to say. Quite enjoyed reading it. It wasn't boring at all. Right, this is paper JAC 26/7, and that's also going to be you, David, to present it. I hope you've got plenty of water with you. Far away.
Yeah, I've drunk all my coffee, sadly. So thank you, Chair. So I'm pleased to present the annual Treasury and Management outturn for 25-26. So the report confirms that both Baber District Council and Mid Suffolk District Council manage their Treasury activities in accordance with the approved Treasury Management Strategy and complied with all statutory and prudential indicators during the financial year. So the key messages are that full compliance was achieved with the SIPFA Treasury Management Code and all Treasury Management indicators. Both councils remained within their approved borrowing and investment limits throughout the year, and that Treasury Management continued to support the delivery of council priorities whilst maintaining a prudent approach to risk. So the economic background is provided in the paper by Arlene Close. So Arlene Close are the council's Treasury advisors. So to give a brief update on some of the goings on in the world, which I'm sure many of you are already aware of anyway. So the year was marked by significant economic uncertainty, including the impact of the US trade tariffs introduced in April 2025, geopolitical tensions and conflict involving Iran in early 2026, and the continuing uncertainty around inflation and future interest rates. But despite this volatility, both councils managed borrowing and investment successfully and maintained strong liquidity. So the borrowing position, as at the 31st of March 2026, has already been mentioned in the Statement of Accounts paper, but to reconfirm, so total borrowing for Babel was 123.6 million, which was down 2.1 million from the previous year, and for Mid Suffolk was 92.8 million, down 14.2 million from the previous year, with a short-term borrowing of only 5 million. In terms of investment activity, both councils during the year sold their holdings in the Shoulder Income Maximiser Fund, but retained investment in the other pooled funds, which continue to provide income returns whilst market values remained mixed. So, as part of the Treasury activities, the council has investments in companies. So both continue to hold loans of approximately 43 million with SIFCO. These loans have generated around 13.9 million of interest income for each council since inception. And both councils have recognised an expected credit loss provision of 443,000 against SIFCO. So for Gateway 14, which is Mid Suffolk only, they received a dividend of 6 million, again, which has already been mentioned during the Statement of Accounts paper. Future returns will be received and are forecast at 2.9 million across the medium-term financial plan period. For Baber Growth, the housing development project at Hadley has achieved practical completion with a few minor works left to complete. Current forecasts indicate that around 4.9 million of council loans may not be recoverable, requiring an increase in the expected credit loss provision, which was recognised in 25-26, and a corresponding minimum revenue provision charge was also recognised in the statement of accounts for this because of the change in the legislation that I mentioned in the statement of accounts paper. For Mid-Suffolk Growth, Phase 2 was cancelled and the associated costs were written off, and the land has been subsequently sold. So to conclude, the Section 151 officer, which is Melissa, has concluded that the Treasury management performance during 25-26 was prudent and effective. Both councils complied with all Treasury prudential requirements, maintained borrowing within the approved limits, managed investments appropriately in a challenging economic environment, and continued to generate income from strategic investments while actively managing associated risks. Members of JASC are asked to note the 25-26 Treasury management outturn and recommend to full council, which will go at the end of September, that Treasury activities were undertaken in accordance with the approved Treasury management strategy and all indicators were complied with. So as per the Constitution, we are required to take the Treasury outturn before the end of September, so this will go to council before the end of September. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Yes, I think I'm bound to ask questions on the Baber growth. Just where are we that? I'm talking about the Corks Lane development. The reporting is a bit scant, so maybe I'm sure other councillors are going to ask, so can I ask on behalf of them, what is the latest position there? Because it's slightly worrying to us.
Yep, so a number of the properties have sold, so there's around 7 or 8 properties have sold. Then there's I think there was around 10 that are in the legal process, with the remaining properties being marketed. Of course, we are still expecting a loss from the capital loans that have been given, so hence why the expected credit loss calculation, which was provided by Arling Close, was recognised, and then the minimum revenue provision then provided as per the guidance in 25-26 for that expected loss.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, questions from the floor. Somebody can develop that one if they wish. I think you were just first, Councillor Jameson, so far away.
Thanks, Chair. So I assume that the high risk or high likelihood of Baber exposing itself to financial risk through its subsidies is because of Baber growth, is it? Or are there other risks as well involved there?
It's not just Baber growth. Of course, Baber growth is quite a lot of that risk, but there's also risk with CIFCO as well. So that risk covers the investments in both CIFCO and Baber growth.
Is there a significant risk with CIFCO then?
Yep, so of course there was an expected credit loss that was calculated for CIFCO. So it is, of course, monitored very closely. The risk of it isn't as high as with Baber in terms of a loss, but it is a risk to us because it is exposed to the commercial world. So it is a risk that is monitored closely. It has its own board of directors, of which Emily is one of them, our Director of Property Development and Regen. So yeah, it is a risk that we do monitor closely.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you. It is on that particular topic again. So I had a couple of questions and they're sort of interlinked. On page 261, where you mentioned about the Baber Growth Limited sort of fund, there's an anticipated final loss in 26-27. And it's not going to be known, it's not known yet. Obviously, we have Treasury management reports on the 28th of September and again on the 25th of January. But looking forward, my understanding is this: you will only know the losses as and when these things are sold. So potentially this could roll into kind of next year and link up with LGR as well. So this is kind of an ongoing thing. We might end up in the final position with an asset, you know, that, yeah. So just wanted to clarify that. So, yeah. Okay, thank you. And then the other thing is about the financial risks on page 251. I always get a bit worried when I see 4s and 3s. You can't really help that, obviously. But what I was wondering, in terms of that, in comparison to previous years, we see, you know, likelihood 4, you know, where it says financial risk through subsidiary companies, the likelihood is a 4 and the impact is a 3, and then vice versa, obviously, with the BABA is financially viable. In comparison to last year and the previous years, has this risk increased or decreased or remains the same? Because obviously 4 and 3 are very basic numbers. But has there been any sort of any analysis into this to identify where is this risk now? Thank you.
Yeah, I can tell you that. So I do review those risks on a quarterly basis. Obviously, we have the quarterly monitoring coming through, so we know if there's going to be any significant overspends or any underachievement in income that will impact on that position. So it probably does a bit of this, I would be honest, because, you know, if we're having, you know, if there's been something that's hit us, like, for example, in BABA with the Kingfisher Leisure Centre, obviously that hit us during the year, so I would have increased that score of likelihood at the time. And also the impact is me assessing our level of reserves again, which can go up and down as things change during the year. So, you know, I review it every quarter with the information that we've got from the team and the financial projections that we've got. So it's a very live one, and we do, senior leadership team do have a look at this every quarter as well. So I've got not just my opinion, but obviously the senior leadership team will have an opinion on whether that score is right or not. So, you know, we do provide some challenge around that.
Okay, Councillor Riley, followed by Councillor Rowe. Councillor Riley first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm agreeing, and in fact I have the same thing. Now, of course, BABA growth, as we've seen, the loss on our loan has gone up from 3.1 million to 4.8 million, you know, which is bad news. May I suggest that for the September meeting, we have a closed meeting, partly closed meeting, and have a representative from BABA Growth to come here and explain to us why we're another £1 million up the spout. And ditto for SIFCO Capital, you know, we now expect that there's a loss there of £434,000. You know, none of which were in this prospectus. You know, we do not make these loans, do not make these investments with the idea of losing money. And having lost money, we don't sit there and throw good money after bad and watch it go worse. So I would like to know, since I wasn't elected at the time we made these investments, you know, how we come to a situation where we have a substantial loss on BABA Growth Limited, and it's only getting worse. And going forward, do we see any improvement? And I think this is for the management of BABA Growth to be here and answer this. Because one of the key questions is, once it started to go wrong, and the question of building on the floodplain was then discussed and made public, so to speak, we did not reassess the whole building program, but instead apparently carried on. So that's my recommendation, is for the September meeting, could we have proper explanations as to why we are now looking at a 4.8 million loss on BABA Growth Limited, and how we expect it to become better. But I think this is a management issue rather than a financial issue.
Right, thank you, Councillor Riley. Well, apologies to the Mid-Suffolk members. This is something that's obviously of great concern. I'm not sure whether coming back, it's really a full council issue, I feel, possibly, but any comments, please, from any officers? Peter.
There are elements of this that are already going to other bodies. So ONS, for example, is carrying out some work. We don't want to duplicate that work because it's been carefully scoped and carefully crafted. The business plans themselves will be going to full council in September. So there'll be an opportunity for members to question and raise concerns regarding business plans. But overall, I would say that this piece of work is already being done, just in other places.
You're obviously saying it should not come back here, it should. Who's going to deal with this? I think that would be my question.
So if it's a question of providing scrutiny, it would have to go to scrutiny. Overall, council has general responsibility for making sure that the business plans are fit for purpose and has responsibility for Baber growth. I would say that if it came back here, it would have to have a very specific purpose and it would have to be carefully scoped. That's a conversation I'm happy to enter into, but it would have to have a reason that is distinct from the reasons that it's going to other places.
I think the point is, Councillor O'Reilly, I'm not sure it's actually our role to, and it's all happened mainly, hasn't it? If it goes to ONS, can they do any good, provide answers? Yep. Okay, well it looks like we have a route, Councillor O'Reilly. I'll talk to my counterpart and you'll be able to attend as former Hadley resident, but we all feel pretty strongly about it. I know that Councillor Jameson does, and myself, and Register as well, so it's a bit of a live issue. Okay, well we have some forward progress, and I'm pleased about that. Any questions on any other subject? Councillor Matheson, please.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a bit of explanation. I'm on page 260 of the papers, the investment benchmarking, table 6. Yeah, I've just wondered what what these numbers mean. I understand that, you know, credit ratings of A+, and I understand bail-in, but the markedly different rates of return that are shown, and I, you know, just if you could just perhaps explain a little more what exactly we're being told here.
Yeah, so Baber's got a greater rate of return because they held onto the Schroeder Fund for longer. And so when the Schroeder Fund was sold in mid-Suffolk, they sold it at a loss of 165k, whereas when Baber sold it, they sold it for a profit or surplus of 39k, which is, so there's quite a gap between those two numbers. So that's created a greater rate of return there for Baber.
So what you're saying is yeah, that this is very restricted to just the pooled fund investments. Tim's nodding. Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. And that's that one. No, that's that. Oh yes, yeah. I think I'm sure I've said this before, but I do. This is again at the bottom on the CIFCO in particular, paragraph in 2.3, 2.4 there. I do not see the relevance of the cumulative income from these investments, but I would like to know what the income from CIFCO to the two councils in the year, actual years. I think that's, to me, that's the relevant piece of information, is what it's doing for our accounts in 25-26.
That's in there. It's shown in the movement between the 31st of March 25 and then the 31st of March 26. So that in table 7, so that movement there is showing you what's the in-year bit.
So have we, is somewhere or other telling us what the year's interest income or investment income is? It's hardly somewhere, is it?
Yep, so from CIFCO, the interest receivable is 2.1 million, and that's shown in table 7, so that's page 261 of the report. And then there's interest payable of 1.7 for Baber and 1.5 relating to CIFCO for Mid Suffolk.
Okay, thank you.
You're happy?
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Rowe, please.
Yeah, no question about well, assumptions or context, because there's kind of quite a lot about kind of US, kind of, the tariffs and the war with Iran. Just wondering how much other stuff, like I know there's things like supply issues with microchips that then affect stuff, and obviously with climate crisis of kind of extreme heat waves causing fires and then lost days of work, kind of, and there's quite large areas of the globe now that are experiencing that, so that kind of I'd expect to have kind of noticeable impact. So yeah, I was just wondering whether any of the non-US, what Trump is doing, context is taken into account.
Yeah, I'd expect us to get those kind of updates in the next, probably more likely for the kind of half-year report. Obviously this was taken from kind of March, obviously before a lot of the kind of extreme weather that we've had, not just in the UK but across Europe, on the wildfires, etc. So I fully expect that kind of commentary from Ireland Close to reflect those kind of things, and the water shortages, etc. And to have, for us to reflect that in the half-year Treasury report.
Okay, any other questions? No, well, we'll move on to debate. Any other points to be made? Not necessarily a question on the papers. Any? If not, I'll go straight to the vote. Councillor Baker.
Could I just check the mechanism for it going to overview and scrutiny? Will it be the council that raises that to go forward, or do we need to, will Alicia deal with that in terms of Baber Group Holdings?
So that's already in hand.
Yep, okay. Anything else? No, this is for noting, and I need proposer and seconder, and we're going to do them separately, that's correct?
Council, yes.
We've got one for Just and the other for two recommendations for council.
Can you speak up a bit?
Second.
Yeah. I need a proposer and a seconder, don't I?
But these are for council. We've got one for Just.
I need a proposer and seconder
Yeah,
for each
you do
paper.
one.
Yes.
No, just one.
Just one for both of
One
them?
for Just.
Okay, all right, okay. Proposer and seconder for the whole lot, because they're the same. Councillor Register and Councillor Matheson, one of each, that's good. Those in favour, please, or against? Coming up soon.
My system's not working, so I might have to do it by a show of hands.
Coming up at the moment.
One more go.
It's not working.
Okay, we're going for a show of hands, I think. Yep, proposer and seconder the same. All in favour, please.
Thank you, Chair, that's unanimous.
That's everybody, so nobody against or any amendments. Thank you. Is everybody happy to carry on? Nobody needs a comfort break? Nope, okay, fine, that's good. Right, we're moving on to the annual Code of Conduct Complaints Monitoring Report. And I think one or two of us might have something to say about this, but yeah, please, Peter, fire off and take us through it. Thank you.
Well, I'm immediately going to delegate to Alicia, who's
He's
kindly written the report, so I'm just here for backup.
Alicia, please. Yes, you have backup, I can tell.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So I don't intend to go into the report in too much detail. I think a lot of it speaks for itself. But in terms of sort of the headline figures coming out of our report this year, so we've had 72 complaints in total this year. That's following on our trend of complaints increasing every year. In fact, we've had a double in the amount of complaints that we're dealing with within the last 3 years. So it's been a bit of a skyrocketing trajectory on the number of complaints coming through. You'll be able to see in the report that there's a sort of continuing widening disparity between the amount of complaints to Baber in comparison to Mid-Suffolk, with Baber accounting for at least 5 in 6 of the complaints that we've had through this year. You'll be able to see that a majority of those complaints are being generated from parish councils, and that is at both Baber and Mid-Suffolk respectively. Parish councils are contributing up to 90% of the total complaints that we've had through this year, which sort of highlights ongoing tensions at that more community level. And on that, in this last year, we've also had an increase in the number of councillors that have been complaining about other councillors at their parish councils, which has been quite tricky to navigate from the team, and it indicates that the standards process is sort of being used as a means of leverage within internal disputes at parish councils. We're going into the parish council complaints in a bit more detail. So in Mid-Suffolk, happy to report that there's no general hotspots of poor behaviour. While there's been more parish councils complained about in Mid-Suffolk, that's usually just for 1 or 2 complaints per parish council. Whereas at Baber, the figures are a bit different. You'll be able to see that there are 1 or 2 councils that are making up a majority of those parish code of conduct complaints, namely Lavenham and Sudbury, as you'll be able to see within the report, which make up for 2/3 of the complaints related to Baber this year. But just a note on district councillors, we continue to be quite assured that the behaviour of our district councillors is in line with the code of conduct, which is really brilliant to see. We've had very little complaints through this year about district councillors, and only 1 has been found in breach, which in terms of numbers is very, very good. So in terms of the types or the elements of the code of conduct that are most regularly complained about, these are largely respect, declarations of interest, and use of position. There are top 3. You'll be able to see further on in the report that where we have found breaches in the code of conduct, these are all for either respect or declarations of interest. As well as that, we have listed out the sanctions that we awarded to the subject councillor when found in breach of a code of conduct, and you'll be able to see that a majority of the sanctions that we've awarded is asking the subject member to apologise to those involved in the incident. Again, this is quite indicative to the strength of sanctions that the Monitoring Office has to issue. We are still waiting for the government to strengthen the standards framework. You might remember that we were back here in summer 2024 with a consultation that was put out to councils, which we as a team responded to, and we're quite glad to see that the trajectory from that consultation is that sanctions will be strengthened. It's just a matter of when. So we're still waiting for that to come through from the government at the moment. But however, despite the increase in the number of disputes and complaints that we've had, as I say, the number of breaches as a whole, both across districts and parish, has been quite low. So 80% of our complaints we actually dismiss, finding no breach of the code of conduct, or simply the code of conduct is not engaged in the first place. So we're quite satisfied that despite many complaints coming in, the behaviour is not necessarily getting worse over the years. And as well, quite happy that despite this increase in workload, we are still working well within our allotted timescales that we have as per the handling procedure. I think we're averaging about 30 working days to complete a complaint top to bottom through the procedure. The procedure outlines us 55 days, so we're falling quite well in line with that. Beyond that, I think that's all I want to say. So thank you, Chair. Open to any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Lucia. Well, you've almost answered my question, haven't you? The cavalry is coming, but when? You know, I've tried to report things, as you know, and it's difficult to put a handle on it, isn't it? And it's worrying, and I think almost as if some parish council where they've had 2 or 3 cases, nothing happens, you see, so it almost encourages the lack of respect towards each other and us and even the public in some cases. I've also noticed I've been Chair of Audit and Standards for 7 years now, and when I was first on, we had lots of cases from, well, not lots, quite a few from other councils, referrals across borders and that, but we get nothing now. It's almost as if whatever people do, there are no sanctions, and it's worrying. So, yeah, well, I think everybody heard what you said, and I'm slightly comforted, but not a lot, I'm afraid, because on the ground it is getting worse, especially in one of my villages and a neighbouring village where, which touches on to one of my villages. It's disastrous, really. Yeah, we all know the one I'm talking about, and we get the flack of that, you see. So the remedies can't come quick enough because it will get worse. But thank you for your preempting my question and for giving some assurance, and nice to know you're on side. Right, open to the floor. Now, I've had my whinge and beef, so Hannah, let's hear from you, please.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me all right? Okay. I really enjoy a Code of Conduct report, so thank you for allowing me my first question. But I'm always interested in the fact that complaints by main category can be a little bit limited. So my questions are, I'm happy if you answer them all as a narrative, so 2 things. Whether you have any thoughts on the themes of the types of the complaints and how they compare to last year. And given that there are significant numbers surrounding declaration of interest and misuse of position, whether you're considering any preventative actions over the next year.
Thank you for your question. So in terms of thoughts on the themes of complaints, it can be quite hard to categorise complaints. So as part of our Code of Conduct handling for our Code of Conduct complaint form, we ask the complainant to list what elements of a Code of Conduct they think the council has breached when they're making their allegations. So that is pulled directly from the different sort of articles that we have in our Code of Conduct. We do have a lot of complaints that aren't just complaining about one element of a Code of Conduct. So it's about sort of taking it on its merit as to what is actually maybe the biggest part of a complaint, the more detrimental part of a complaint that person is alleging that council is breached. So that's sort of how we would generally sort of identify them in terms of the themes. In terms of comparison to year on year, I don't have our last year's annual report up per se, but the themes we find in terms of the categories that come forward as our most complained about is usually the same. We get a lot to do with respect. I would always say that respect is our biggest one in terms of a Code of Conduct for complaints. And that's because respect is so up to interpretation as well. People have sort of different thresholds on what is appropriate communication and what is not. So that's always a bit of a subjective one in the Code of Conduct, which relates to more complaints coming in. In terms of declarations of interest and misuse of position, I would say misuse of position is definitely one that's come forward a bit more this year in comparison to last year. We do a lot of work with SALC, Suffolk Association of Local Councils, who help to deliver training in our parish councils as well as to our district councils if they need it. We also have every other month we meet up with all the monitoring officer teams across Suffolk, so all the districts, borough and Suffolk County Council, and we kind of have more generalised discussions about what categories of complaints are coming up most often across the whole of Suffolk, and sort of work together alongside SALC, who attend those meetings as well, to kind of pinpoint what the problem areas are and try and put some training in there when it's needed on a more generalised basis. So I hope that answers both your questions.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I had Councillor Baker and then Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Mine is on the same sort of path. I wonder if these are to do with cases. So I'm wondering, is there any way of us identifying, yes, there's been 60 complaints in, but like 20 of them are to do with that one case that is in that one area because it all went wrong, you know, for various reasons. So I wondered if there's any way of us doing that. It would also be helpful to know what other sanctions we might well consider. And I don't think it's a bad thing that there's an increase, because I think generally the public are becoming more involved in politics and more aware of local councillors and should be held to account. So I don't think that's a bad thing, probably.
So you can see the sanctions that are set out in the report as sort of what was open to us, and you know, as Bryn has highlighted, you know, far be it from us to criticise, but there's very little that we can do in terms of making substantive consequences for even the more egregious breaches of the Code of Conduct, where we have found someone to be significantly in breach. The other thing is, we spoke a little bit, or Hannah raised the issue of preventative action, and we you know, identifying themes and trends, and there are certain councils that have simply repeats and rehashes of the same arguments amongst themselves through the Code of Conduct process. Our issue is we've got a strange role, which is that we are both there to provide advice and support, but they are meant to manage their own training, manage their own members, manage their own member development needs. We are always there, and always use this opportunity, this platform, as a shout out to say, if you ever have any concerns as a parish councillor, as a clerk, as a chair or a parish councillor, any concerns around governance, get in touch with us. We're happy to provide some time to have a phone call and give advice. So always come to us early if there are issues. And we have done, where there have been a number of cases of members breaching the code in, for example, a specific area on a specific topic or theme. We have done targeted training as a result of that on something like declarations of interest, for example. In terms of, I mean, you can see on the paper as well where the complaints are coming from. So in terms of, so while we wouldn't necessarily say this was all as a result of this one incident, you can see that there are certain parish councils or town councils where there are an awful lot of complaints coming from over others. So while we wouldn't break it down more specifically than that, you can see where the hotbeds are in terms of Code of Conduct complaints.
Could I follow up? I might be a bit of a stickler, but it talks about apologies. Is there any way that we can make these a public apology, a sort of even in a full council, so the ones that are upheld, are we able to do that in a full council? Because people don't want to be shown up as, you know, not having behaved appropriately. So can we do that?
Thank you. That is an option that is available to us. We would often take the perspective that the sanction needs to be aligned with what happened in the breach. So if that councillor had made a breach and their action happened at a public meeting of the council, we would ask them to apologise in the same setting of which the breach occurred. So we would ask them to apologise at council. That is something that is available to us and will have come through in a couple of the apologies in the report. Similarly, if someone breaches the Code of Conduct but through maybe email or like a face-to-face private meeting but in their role as a councillor, we would ask them to apologise to that person who complained using that same format. So we would ask them to apologise via email direct rather than to make it into a more of a wider thing than it has to be. But yeah, we definitely do that.
Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, I mean, it's worrying that the volume of complaints that's coming in is going up and up, but really the number that are actually upheld is quite low. So I'm wondering whether at the initial stage it can be filtered more strongly by giving the complainant the almost the reasons why it's likely that it will be dismissed. You know, rather than, I mean, I you know, forget what the detail is of at what point it goes to the independent members to look at and so on and so on. But whether, you know, some of the people can be dissuaded from confirming that they want to make a complaint by being shown the reasons why it will probably fail at an earlier stage, so there's less work involved in actually pushing them back. Because as I say, you know, you're looking at you know, up the numbers dismissed 36, and the code was not engaged 21. I mean, that's such a big slice of the total, isn't it? It's 80% or something. You know, can we you know, persuade people? I mean, the training side. I mean, yes, I think we just got to keep working and working at that, because it is. You know, when you see these things, I'm having happily speaking, not from experience recently, but you know, the councillors, the public, the chairing, you know, all these things, you know, the better they are, the less complaints will be forthcoming, one would hope.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. So I would say that our communication within the monitoring officer team is quite strong. We are very clear with complainants at whatever level they are, be it a member of the public, an officer, another councillor. We're very clear about why the code of conduct maybe is not engaged, why we've not found a breach. So we're very forthcoming with that information. So it might be handy just to walk through the process for handling a code of conduct complaint just a little bit. So when we have a code of conduct complaint come in, we generally do 2 key tests before getting underway. So we need to work out whether that councillor was acting within their official capacity as a councillor at the time of the incident, and whether the code of conduct that they've signed up to is sufficiently engaged. If one of those tests isn't met, we do not go forward with a code of conduct complaint. That is communicated to the complainant why we're not taking that forward. We do... It's a little bit tricky to give conclusive reasons as to why we're not taking things forward at an early stage, because if those tests are met and we think it's valid to go through the handling procedure, we have to go to the councillor that's been complained about for their interpretation of events, for their sort of defence, as it were, to the allegations. So it's quite hard until we've heard both sides of a story to really give advice quite clear cut on whether we think there is a breach or no breach, because we have to weigh up that information on balance. But we do have a lot of people that contact us informally before putting in a complaint, where we are able to give advice and say, oh, if you wanted to put in a complaint about this, this is relevant to the code of conduct and we can take this forward for you, but this element of your grievance that you have is not related to the code of conduct, or it's quite clear that member was not acting in their official capacity. So we can tell them from the start, before we get involved in that formal process, what we will and won't take forward in terms of an investigation. But I do like to think that as a team we are quite clear with people on why we do and why we don't take things forward, and try and mitigate where possible, which is why you'll see in the report the number of complaints that we dismiss quite early on, at either initial assessment stage or just because the code of conduct was not engaged to begin with. That makes up a majority of the complaints that we actually do end up dismissing. Thank you.
So yeah, so exactly half as it happens, isn't it? That just 36 are dismissed at the earliest stage out of the 72. Looking at that, it's table 5.2 there. Okay. Thank you. Sorry,
Okay, thank you. This normally takes about 3 minutes, doesn't it? But Councillor registered to speak, then Councillor Jameson, and maybe me after that. We'll see.
Okay, this is confusing me. I'm a Sudbury Town Councillor. You mentioned Sudbury Town Council and Lavenham Parish Council specifically. I am only vaguely aware of a couple of occasions when the monitoring officer has been involved in an issue in Sudbury Town Council in the last year, or that year. So I'm a bit concerned that we seem to have a large number of issues which I'm totally oblivious to, and yet I sit in all but one of the subcommittees. So if it was something to do with the main council business or subcommittee, I would have heard of this, and I would have also probably been advised by officers in some sense, but it hasn't. So I'm a bit confused as to how that happens. And the other question is a general one, really. How many of these are there the same people making complaints and therefore could arguably be considered vexatious?
Thank you, Councillor Register. So I think Peter and I are going to do a bit of a double act on those questions. But in terms of the Sudbury matter, I don't want to go into too much detail in the open session of this. Happy to talk to you in more detail after this meeting. In terms of the amount of complaints we've had for Sudbury, that is unique in comparison to Laverton. So Sudbury, we had an issue where a member of the public or two members of the public put in a code of conduct complaint against all Sudbury town councillors, which has resulted in that number being the highest of the lot. So I don't think off the top of my head we found any breaches, or maybe found one breach in Sudbury. A lot of them were dismissed because the code of conduct wasn't engaged, or just failed at initial assessment because there was insufficient evidence that Sudbury town councillors were acting in their official capacity at the time, which is why you won't have been informed. We do take the perspective of, if we do dismiss things at the very, very early stage, sometimes it is best to just not inflame tensions more by letting the councillors know. If we don't think it's something you need to know, we won't let you know. So that'll be why that's a bit of a surprise to you, but do rest assured that there is, from our perspective for the last year, there are very little problems coming out of Sudbury. So it is mainly an anomaly in the figures, I would call it. But I'll let Peter handle your question about repeat complaints.
You'll be unsurprised to hear that there are a number of residents, councillors, whatever the source, who make repeat complaints, and that will be due to ongoing tensions, ongoing issues within particular parishes or particular towns, and oftentimes it escalates quite quickly. So if you have one group who put a code of conduct complaint about someone, then they'll put a code of conduct complaint against them, and it escalates quite significantly. We would never really, unless it had gotten to a point whereby it was entirely unmanageable, look to go down the vexatious communication, because at the end of the day, members of the public and other councillors have a right to expect that their complaints will be handled appropriately and will be given an appropriate assessment by us, the monitoring office. It's often the case whereby we can't take a boy who cried wolf approach, if that makes any sense, just because X number of complaints haven't been found in breach. There often could be a case of some of them are found in breach. So we think we need to try where we can to accommodate even the most stalwart of complainers. But I will also say that it takes up a significant amount of capacity. So even when we dismiss a complaint, and I'll use this a bit of a plug to talk about capacity, because I think it's an important conversation for us to have, even if we dismiss a complaint in that initial phase where we turn around and say the code isn't engaged, it's not just that dismissal, it's then the back and forth that you have with the complainant about why you dismissed that complaint. If you go further down that line, that back and forth then increases considerably based on the number of conversations that you have to have. That number doubling over the course of the last 3 years represents significant amount of time is taken up by the monitoring office team dealing with complaints oftentimes from repeat customers, but it is not an easy, and also we're also seeing an influx of potentially assisted complaints coming in, so whereby before complaints might have been more reasonably succinct and to the point. Nowadays we're seeing the use of assistive technology insofar as things like AI potentially to enhance the quality and length of code of conduct complaints, and it's clearly designed to try and elicit a response based on what our code of conduct says. So those take significantly more time to engage with, determine whether to progress, and then determine an appropriate response. So the capacity issue is significant. There have been a number of times where we have considered what our vexatious communication policy looks like, but I don't believe we have yet implemented anything.
Thank you very much.
Okay, then Tim, looks like you're off the hook. Councillor Jameson, you want to speak, please?
Second part of Councillor Register's question was my question, but just on that, you alluded to a vexatious policy, so we've actually got a vexatious policy, have we?
As an authority, I think most authorities have a vexatious communicators policy, but where it's it goes in varying scales of severity. I couldn't tell you the full ins and outs of it. That's probably a conversation for our complaints team. But it would be a case of it would start with we have a focused inbox that they would use, and then over time, if the vexatious communication would continue, you would then look to bar them from communicating with the authority.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just a quick comment from myself. When I was first elected as a parish councillor, which was a long while ago, way in the last century, we had a pack which all the code of conduct and things all came in, and that no longer happens. As I think they can get it from self, but they have to do it themselves, and that's changed. Because I've just got 2 new councillors, and they're doing the best, but the first thing I said was, what happens now? And they've come into a council where there are issues, and it's a bit frightening for them. One of them is the first female they've had in a 9-person council for probably about 3 years. So you can think how she's feeling, and there's not a lot of help there. So that might be down to us. That might cut out a lot of the things that happen later on. Maybe, Alicia, that's something that you should bear in mind. A little bit done now might mean better outcomes later, I think, because these are both very professional people, and they're stepping forward and quite bewildered. Something to take on board, maybe. Okay, well, I'm sorry this is taking so long, guys. Yes, Councillor Register?
I was just going to comment on what you were just saying, is that in terms of Sudbury Town Council, new councillors get given a wodge of stuff, which includes a copy of the Code of Conduct and all relevant policies relating to councillor conduct and any other issues that councillors get involved in. But yeah, I can understand why that doesn't happen at parish councils because of the much lower level of resources. I mean, anyone who knows our town clerk would be unsurprised to hear that every dot is crossed and I is T'd.
So this is something that Sudbury Town Council do themselves?
Oh yes, yes.
Okay.
I got a pack. I found it the other day, and it's the pack I was given when I became a council.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I'm pleased that happens. Yeah, Peter, you wish to comment further?
Just very quickly. First of all, no apologies needed for taking time on this one. I think it's really important. I'm glad we get the opportunity to come here and have a chat about it because it's something that we don't often get to talk about in public. The issue around PACs, at the very least, a parish councillor of any parish council will see a copy of the Code of Conduct because you've got to sign the Code of Conduct to be a parish councillor. So at the very least, they're aware of the minimum expectations. They might not be aware of applications and how we process Code of Conduct issues. That's really down to the individual clerks and chairs of those parish councils to get together and organise amongst themselves or approach SALC for some advice or some training. They've got lots of resources that are available. And also, as I said, we're always happy to have a chat with people if they have any concerns around the Code of Conduct. But at the very least, every parish councillor has to sign a copy of the Code of Conduct and understand what they are undertaking when they accept public office.
Okay, thank you. We've given that good. Yes, Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I take this for the 72 complaints we've received, 36 have been dismissed and 21 were neither here nor there. I suddenly realised that in the last 12 years, I've only been referred to the monitoring officer twice, which I was quite surprised. I thought I would be much higher. But I see that we invoke, the complainants invoke the code of conduct, the complaint. It's a measure, it's a device for one, possibly achieving justice in a perception where justice has not been displayed. It's also a measure of punishing people whose activities and descriptions are not in your favour. In both cases, actually I got no problems with the complaints procedure and the ability for ratepayers, whatever, to make the complaints. I'm gratified of the 72 complaints. We have 57 which fizzle out. Fine, that's great, and I'm quite happy with that. And of the 2 complaints against me, which were not the only complaints I had, but 2 complaints. One fizzled out because I demanded that the complaint have a bit more substance to it and was not just chucked at me that I brought the office into disrepute. And the other complaint was at county level and was dismissed with the comment from the county solicitor that I sailed quite close to the wind. Which my comment was, and that's what makes it interesting, which he did not appreciate. So I see the complaint system, as working. I mean, it's like Councillor Harron, you and I were on some adjudication committee some time ago, and when we read the report and read the problems there, it was really a case of the complainant trying to achieve a measure of justice. More importantly, I think, trying to ensure that the person she was complaining about did not proceed on his existing path. And quite rightly, in my opinion, the complaint was dismissed, but we went through the process and there was no reason for the complainant to be unhappy with the result, apart from it not being the result that they wanted. So, go ahead. Hey, 72 complaints, 3/4 of them dismissed, great. That's what I want, because what it also shows is that our taxpayers are involved in the process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alicia.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just picking up on some of the points that you raised, Councillor Riley, especially sort of a comment about how the Code of Conduct complaints process is used by complainants. People do use it in different ways to get different outcomes. I do acknowledge that. I think I touched on it as well in my introduction, just slightly about how maybe members of the public might use the complaints process in a different way to a fellow councillor would. But I think that's kind of challenged by the Code of Conduct handling procedure that we have, which lets us be very objective about Code of Conduct complaints. It's very, very clear in how we follow the process, what we have to do, which means that no matter how the Code of Conduct complaints process is used by external people, we will always at least do our best to deliver an objective result with appropriate sanctions if they're needed. So that handling procedure is a really good thing to fall back on to make sure that we're pretty equal across the board when we're handling everything. And like you say, in terms of standards board committee meetings, which you sit on with Councillor Hurren and Councillor Dowling and Councillor Plum, I'm quite happy that we haven't had to use a standards board for this year, be it either Labour members sitting on it or Mid-Suffolk. So that's a good indicator that maybe the extreme complaints that require a standards board are not coming through as much this year, which is good to see. Thank you.
Councillor Rowe.
Just looking at risks and thinking about comments about capacity and also about kind of councillors' experience. Would it make sense to have the capacity, kind of both officer and kind of councillor capacity, and then also the capacity of what happens when parish town councils need more help from district as well as south. So yeah, because obviously I know I've seen complaints and people don't necessarily use the nicest language when they respond if they don't get the result they want as well. So there's that element. You seem to be doing okay, but it won't be nice if there's someone who's properly annoyed and they just go a pox on all your houses, then that approach.
I could speak a little bit about that. It might not be anything new to what Peter said to a previous question, but in terms of officer capacity, it is quite challenging. As Peter says, it's not just the increase in complaints that we've had over the past couple of years. It is that increase in quite persistent communication that you have with either party involved in a code of conduct complaint, either during the process or after a decision has been reached. And as you say, a lot of emails that we do get they can be quite strong. I think we have to remember that we are essentially just the messenger. We are looking at things quite objectively. I mean, we have a weekly meeting, so me, Peter and Tom, we have a weekly meeting where we discuss ongoing cases, how we can help each other with our caseload, because we've all got designated sort of caseload amongst our open complaints, and talk about how we're feeling about the process of specific complaints, where we're kind of going with our decisions. So we've got sort of each other's back, and we try and help each other with our capacity as much as possible. It can get overwhelming at times, and it is kind of down to those particular parishes or towns where you do have a big influx of complaints, and that is generally come from a breakdown in relationships at a parish or a town council, particularly when it's sort of a councillor complaining about another councillor. They're not particularly issues that go away very smoothly. Has a lot of kind of communication generated from decision notices and whether they think a sanction is strong enough or if we should have found him in breach and we didn't, etc. So a lot of our time, as I say, does go into managing sort of expectations through a process. But there's a way that we can maybe look at those town and parish councils where there are problems happening quite clearly and see what support that we can provide to kind of help our capacity in terms of a team and help overall a parish or town council's capacity to resolve these problems before they maybe come to our desk and help them feel empowered enough to do what they're there to do in the first place, which is represent their communities and make important decisions for their communities, rather than getting into fights with each other, for lack of a better term. So yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you. Any more questions? Chris Bolton, please.
Just a quick one. Really good report. Wonderful discussion. I can't quite work out whether you have enough capacity in your team to deal with all the complaints that are coming forward. I think early on it seemed as if you were saying yes. I'm not quite so sure now. Would you? Yeah, what's your honest opinion on that? Do you think you have enough capacity?
So honest opinion, I would say it is so cyclical. It's really challenging because you can have 1 month where you have so many complaints come in due to a particular parish council meeting that's taking place, and everyone's quite grumpy about it and are sending in complaints. And then you could have one where very little comes forward. I would say the overall increase and the overall complexity of the cases and the sheer number of back and forths you end up having to have, even if a complaint is dismissed in the early instance, I would say we're fairly hard pushed, and that makes things quite tricky. And when we finally feel like, in many cases, we've managed to resolve issues or tensions within an area, another area will pop up and then create more tensions. So it can be quite cyclical. It's hard with capacity because I can't turn around and say, like, this is how much, if I was to ask, someone was to ask me how much of my time or Alicia's time or Tom's as monitoring officer's time was spent last month dealing with code of conduct complaints, that would be fundamentally different to how it would have been in this time last year or earlier in the year. It depends on the time of year and it depends on month by month. Sometimes it is very tricky.
I think you could have put a pitch in there for more resource.
I was hoping that was implicit. No, I think we're limited anyway in terms of monitoring officers, because I think you have a statutory limit. Whereas, obviously we're corralled quite well by other members of the team as well, who keep us in check to make sure we're doing what we need to do. So, but thank you for the setup.
I think the problem here, we do probably just have the capacity. The big problem is we have no teeth. And if you don't stamp on it the first time, then it comes back and back again. Yes, I can see my officers both nodding. That's where we are, isn't it? We used to have teeth, and then the last government took them all away, didn't they? It was all sort of wiped out. But that's a general comment, but we just don't have any statutory method of dealing with this. That's the problem, and they're both nodding. That is the problem, and if we don't control it, then it will get worse, because it involves other people to follow suit, doesn't it? And you lose control. And yes, one of my councils, I would say, is pretty much on the verge of that, and I've had problems before because nothing happened. It's happening again. So I look forward to, I know you're engaging with the government and the particular department, but maybe you can write again, because it's getting difficult. Okay, I think at that point we have to vote on this, don't we, Beth? So if you like to set it up, I'll ask for a proposer and a seconder. Oh, your machinery is shot. Oh, sorry. No, it's a show of hands. So all those... pardon? I'll propose seconder from Mid-Suffolk. Councillor Rowe, you're happy?
I was going to say, can we also add that the capacity bit is added to the key risks? Because that seems to be...
Yes, I would think so. Yes, I've already opened with that and said it at the end of the summing up. Yep, I'm all for that. Okay, I'm proposed, and Councillor Rowe seconder. All in favour, please. That's everybody. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry to the officers it's all taken so long at the end. Forward plan, item 10. Are you happy with it? I think if I could ask the officers, things will get added to it as we go along, won't they? It's a living document. I know Melissa said earlier there's a couple of things to go on, I believe, soon. Yep. All right. Okay.
Question?
Yes, go on.
Yeah. Are we expecting another report on the making sure we get to the finishing line with the EY? We've had a couple of looks at that.
So the audit reports will be coming back in January from EY. So that will give the position whether you wanted something else in between, as by way of an update.
I don't know. I was just wondering whether we if we hear that things are going quite well, and so we may not need to look at all that detail again, or perhaps I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I'll take that away and have a look at the full plan and see what works.
Yes, I think you've got to answer your 300 questions, but you can do that all by yourself, can't you? I take it. Okay, so everybody's happy with that. End of meeting. Thank you all very much for your efforts, your work and your attendance. It's been Been very good.